World War III update. Here's what's going on. 72 hours ago, I notified you that the Russian radio station, known colloquially as the Doomsday radio station, which transmits at 4625 kilohertz, has been broadcasting an unusual amount of encoded messages as of late. So unusual that, in fact, we're seeing record amounts of cryptic messages on a frequency that otherwise, for the better part of the century, has only transmitted a monotone chime. We are seeing in the past week record amounts of messages being transmitted over this frequency, indicating that Russia is getting their military prepared for something. We don't know what. It could be related to strategic forces, because of course this frequency and its function is somewhat equivalent to US Stratcom's emergency action messages. So it could be something that's pertinent to Russian forces and a planned and long anticipated offensive to finish off the four territories, or it could be something to do with the Middle East and the Russians knowing that there could potentially be spillover effects as a result of what's going to happen, need to put their military at a higher state of readiness. It's important to understand that we are seeing record amounts of messages transmitted on this frequency. What it means, nobody knows. But it signifies that something big is about to go down. And I can tell you, I'm all about facts over feelings, but there's a very disquieting tension in the air as it pertains to the Middle East right now. It appears as though talks are about to reach an impasse, as they have recently in Ukraine. On the Ukrainian front, it appears as though Russia is getting ready to do a major offensive. Marco Rubio at the U.S. State Department said today that the United States is willing to acknowledge Crimea as Russian territory, which is a superficial concession at best, but that if we can't overcome this impasse in negotiations, then we're going to have to wash our hands of this conflict, leave it to the Europeans and the Ukrainians to sort out, signifying that something big is about to go down, because U.S. forces are currently exiting Conoco gas fields inside Syria. And this is a place which they've basically been in control of for many, many years. They're handing over control to the Syrian government, but they've also reiterated a level 4 travel advisory warning not to travel to Syria because they're claiming that attacks are imminent. Now, of course, if shit was about to go down with Iran, we would likely see lots of spillover effects into the surrounding regions. U.S. forces would likely want to evacuate certain military bases, and these moves would seem very extemporaneous at best because they haven't been broadcast. There was no talk about the U.S. leaving these bases in recent months. It just kind of happened. It was an impromptu thing, it appears. Of course, obviously, maybe there was some other long-term planning, but at least as far as we can see, it appears as though they are abandoning some of these facilities. So usually that's a sign that they're trying to either get troops out of harm's way or move those troops into places where they're going to be needed. It appears as though they're moving into Iraq, if I'm not mistaken, which could potentially be used as some sort of staging ground for some sort of offensive on Iran. Not a ground offensive. I think we're far away from that at this point, but something is going on right now. Even Hezbollah is starting to make threats again. Now, in terms of what's happening in Iran, understand that the Russians know that if Israel attacks Iran, things can escalate very quickly because Israel could attack Iran's nuclear facilities. Now, Iran has threatened to attack Israel's ticking time bomb, which is Dimona nuclear power plant. Hitting Dimona nuclear power plant, Iran doesn't even need a nuclear missile because the nuclear missile is right there. It's a giant Chernobyl ticking time bomb smack dab in the middle of southern Israel, which would render that entire region inhospitable for life, probably within a 50-kilometer radius of the Dimona nuclear plant, were they to hit it with their conventional ballistic missiles. And of course, that would prompt a response by the Israelis, who have Jericho nuclear missiles. They have submarine-launched nuclear missiles that they could fire at Iran. Where they would fire them at, who knows? But this is perhaps why Russia's doomsday radio frequency is broadcasting these messages, because they know that something is coming. This could also be telegraphing to the United States, because of course this is a way for the Russians to send messages, nominal messages even, to the United States that we see what you're getting ready to do and we're ready for it. Of course, the Russians have to be ready to react. They have over-the-horizon radars, which could be implicated in any Iranian defense. So, well, they at least had up until the Ukrainians attacked those over-the-horizon radars last year. Many people have forgotten about that. The red lines established by the Iranians seem irreconcilable with the demands of the Israelis. Here's what the Iranians are claiming. They refuse to dismantle any of their centrifuges. They refuse to halt enrichment, which is currently estimated at 60% levels of enrichment, which far exceeds what's required to run a nuclear reactor. In fact, we had a couple guests in here yesterday who work in the field of nuclear physics, and they were telling us that yes, above and beyond 20% enrichment, there really isn't any legitimate reason to have that level of enriched uranium aside for a nuclear weapon. And they were speaking very dispassionately from a apolitical point of view, so not speaking at all to Iran's sovereign right to possess nuclear weapons, but just speaking matter-of-factly that there isn't any need to have enriched uranium over 20%. Most would estimate 3.67%, in fact, for running a nuclear power plant, okay? So this is a sign that things are not looking good, okay? I'm just taking a look here. Looks like somebody's doing something outside, and I need to make sure that nothing is... Okay, no, it's all good. Just the Christian people next door. We have a nice group of Christian people. They get together every weekend and they sing and they do positive stuff. I love those guys. They're great tenants to have next door. Now, where was I? I was talking about the 4 red lines that were established by the Iranians. They refused to dismantle their centrifuges. They refused to halt enrichment. They refused to reduce their stockpiles below the 2015 JCPOA levels. And they also have chosen not to discuss their missile program, which was another precondition which was added after Witkoff went to talk with Aragachi in that shuttle diplomacy in Oman. Now, the Iranian foreign minister just went to Russia to see Vladimir Putin. So we have an interesting triangulation happening here, and I'm pretty sure that whatever Russian offensive happens in Ukraine is likely going to coincide with shit going down with Iran, because that could escalate very quickly, lots of spillover effects into the surrounding regions, and things can go off the rails very quickly. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu is going to be making a special statement on Saturday, tomorrow, and the subject is going to be Iran, and he claims it is going to be very significant. Will this be the final ultimatum? Many believe that they only have 2 months. They keep throwing out these arbitrary dates, 2 months before basically Iran crosses the threshold and Israel is no longer able to attack Iran without recourse. The question is, if they fail in neutralizing Iranian nuclear facilities, as soon as they do that, the fatwa that the Ayatollah has imposed, which prohibits the development of nuclear weapons, will be lifted, and they will immediately start acquiring and amassing and putting together all the pieces that they claim to have for the purpose of manufacturing nuclear weaponry, and likely utilize said nuclear weaponry or threaten Israel with those weapons. We're talking about a mutually assured destruction biblical scenario, a Gog versus Magog scenario unfolding. And it could happen very quickly. Israel's strategic objective is to topple the Iranian regime by destroying the nuclear program. They want nothing short of destroying this program. And this is a maximalist demand. They see no pathway forward for Iran to have any nuclear program whatsoever. This is according to a prominent Israeli journalist. Defense officials now believe the window of time to eliminate Tehran's nuclear program will be gone within months. And that, of course, could create a substantial shift in the balance of power within the region. Recently, the Saudis delivered a letter to the Iranians from the Saudi prince. An emissary delivered a letter to the Ayatollah himself. And this signifies that there is some potential temporizing happening and attempts to manage the blowback from an Iranian response by the Saudis. They're doing preemptive damage control because it's very likely that Saudi airspace will be implicated in any sort of attack that is staged by the United States or Israel. And thus, this could have some negative repercussions for the Saudis in terms of the Iranian proxy Houthi groups being activated. Now, some people are speculating that the Chinese, who recently brokered a deal between the Saudis and the Iranians, are actually have made great headway in terms of bridging the Sunni-Shiite divide. Of course, the Iranians are primarily Shiites, and the Saudis are primarily Sunnis. This has been a long-standing enmity in the Middle East that's largely been exploited by Westerners up until this time. But it appears as though there may be some possibility even of the Saudis engaged in some level of mediation on this particular issue. But in my personal opinion, I think that this is just a feint. I think that the Saudis, who are warehousing copious amounts of U.S. weaponry, one of the biggest purchasers of U.S. weaponry, really have nothing to gain from that they couldn't get from the United States from the Iranians. People are saying that the Saudis are trying to get uranium. The Saudis have enough money to buy uranium and get nuclear fissile materials from anywhere they want, from Pakistan to the United States, possibly even from Israel if the need arose. So I don't think it's that. I think the Saudis are just doing preemptive damage control because they know that the shit is going to hit the fan, okay? According to Israeli News Channel 12, an Israeli prep is underway for an independent strike. Citing unspecified foreign reports, Israel can launch effective assaults on Iran's nuclear program even without U.S. support. While this seems kind of silly, they're likely not going to be able to penetrate deep enough into the bunkers. Perhaps they're able to disrupt the supply chain and take out some surface level buildings, but that's likely all they're going to be able to do without the help of the stealth bombers. Now, it's very likely what the goal is here is to provoke the Iranians into doing True Promise 3, which of course would give casus belli for the United States to enter into the conflict on the side of the Israelis, signaling that they have no choice, okay? Now, we've also seen massive amounts of cargo flights continue ramping up, especially in the last 24 hours, with hundreds of bunker-busting bombs entering into Israel over the past 24 hours. These deliveries are reportedly to prepare Israel for a strike on Iranian nuclear sites. Now, this has basically been a constant flow of weapons into Israel since October 7th, but it is ramped up as of late. So I'm not sure if the purpose is for that, or if it's for Hezbollah, or it's for Syria. Right now, the U.S. has released a level 4 travel advisory for Syria, advising everybody to get out as soon as possible. In fact, they are pulling back U.S. forces from the Conoco oil and gas fields, which is very strange considering that they've held this territory for many, many years. They've basically relinquished control of it to the new authoritarian leadership there, which of course is this weird derivation of ISIS, okay? An ISIS commander basically was given the reins of power in Syria, and the Americans are now fleeing, okay? That's what's happened there. And it appears as though they're fleeing to Iraq, although that is not conclusive. But it might be that they are removing themselves from that situation because they realize that this could be a potential target of the Iranians should this thing really go to hell. So I would not be surprised in the run-up to an actual attack on Iran that we don't see U.S. military bases start to evacuate or prepare for a retaliatory strike. According to the Iranian foreign minister, Araghchi, I can never pronounce that name, Araghchi, we are hearing contradictory and conflicting messages from the American side in negotiations. France has reiterated a travel ban for citizens to Iran. All travel to Iran is strongly discouraged. All trips are strictly prohibited, regardless of the reason, according to the French Foreign Ministry spokesperson. Iran will only accept a deal. Senior Iranian officials reportedly told the U.S. delegation that they will only accept a deal willing to accept limits on its enrichment of new weapons-grade uranium, but not without watertight guarantees that U.S. President Trump would not again ditch a future nuclear deal similar to his withdrawal from the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Well, really, the U.S. word is as good as the paper it's written on, much like the currency, which is tanking because gold has hit $33.50 on the last trading day. I highly suspect that the reasons for wanting to intervene in Iran transcend any sort of nuclear program. They're just looking for an excuse for regime change. And they'll get there by any other means, even if Iran complies. In fact, the Ayatollah sent out a very interesting message. And I want you to understand this message that he said, because this basically is the situation in a nutshell. According to the Ayatollah Khamenei, he says, first they will tell us to denuclearize. We'll agree, and they'll bring forth another subject. Why do you have missiles? They'll say. We'll give up the missiles, and then they'll bring forth another subject. Why do you show resistance? Why do you support the Palestinians, Hezbollah, and Hamas? We will comply and retreat, and they'll bring forth another subject, most likely about human rights. We'll comply to their standards of human rights. Then they'll bring forth the separation of mosque and state. No matter what you agree on, they won't leave you alone. Give them an inch of rope, and they'll want to be a cowboy, right? So that's the thinking, at least from the theocratic regime. Now, there may be some rift developing between the political class there and the theocrats and the clerics, but it is yet to materialize into any form of meaningful resistance. As I indicated, the U.S. is withdrawing from Syria into Iraq. There is numerous footage showing massive convoys of U.S. troops piling out of the regions in northeastern Syria, particularly around the Conoco oil fields, and they're moving into the Nineveh governorate of Iraq. Trump has somewhat backpedaled on his statements about not wanting a war with Iran. He denies he waved off an attack on Iran, as the New York Times claims, but adds that he's in no rush to resort to that option. Okay? How much time do we got left? 18%? All right. The State Department, as I indicated, did issue a level 4 travel warning. According to the Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister, U.S. threats about military buildup and military buildup in the region raise questions about Washington's seriousness and intentions to reach an understanding during the negotiation. And of course, the embargo continues, with Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, saying that we are prepared to take all actions available to get Iran's energy exports down to zero, which of course would pose an existential economic crisis for the Iranians. There are rumors, and these are just rumors, that China is feeding satellite data to the Houthis. Now, with all the talk and the anti-Sino rhetoric as of late, as we're in the thick of the new global trade war / Cold War / decoupling, we're going to see China implicated in more and more of this. Now, there are satellite images that the Chinese apparently have given to the Houthis. According to the U.S. State Department, they confirmed that the Chinese Changguang Satellite Technology Company, with close links to the Chinese military, have been helping the Houthis in Yemen with targeting during their rocket attacks on U.S. Navy vessels. And just today, the White House, in fact, came out, you can't see it because my printer sucks, with a lab leak message, a designated page about the lab leak. Almost looked like some kind of weird documentary or something. So they only disclose something when they want something. I want you guys to understand that. When it's instrumental towards whatever sort of interventionist gallivants they're about to embark on, that is when they're going to talk about lab leak, and not a minute sooner. So if they're unveiling or they're releasing information, understand that there's an ulterior motive there. Hezbollah has also issued a warning for the first time in a long time. The Hezbollah Secretary General stated that our nation stands united, fearless, and resolute. Diplomacy has a chance, but we are ready to act. And of course, if a war flares up between Iran and Israel, then Hezbollah is going to activate once again. I was going to talk about the nuclear shield, which now apparently is going to be leveraging SpaceX. You remember how for the longest time I've been talking about the main reason for SpaceX is US Stratcom and the weaponization and militarization of space? Well, now that's pretty much been confirmed. Even though Elon denies any relationship between Palantir, he basically, I just see somebody else out there. Okay, they're good. Looks like they might be Christian too. Okay, and it doesn't matter if they're Christian or not. It's just that I have a lot of Christians around here because next door they like to do their festivals and stuff. Anyways, SpaceX, they are now going to be integral to this Golden Dome strategic missile defense thing that Trump wants to create, okay? Elon has denied a relationship with Palantir, who, if you guys didn't know, Palantir is like the Skynet of the military, essentially. They're the ones who do data analytics, and effectively, they're the ones who are imputing all this data into their data analysis tools, and they're able to extract from that predictive power. They're able to basically direct the battlefield in a very precise manner, okay? Just imagine having a system that was able to provide real-time intelligence, and so you don't even have to, it's basically the general of the future. It's not going to be generals that make decisions, it's going to be Palantir that makes the decisions. So Palantir, in partnership with U.S., I presume Space Force, Air Force, Strategic Command, is going to be partnering with SpaceX in order to make this thing, because of course SpaceX has the rocket infrastructure, they have Starlink, and that is all going to be integral towards creating this system, which is going to be very escalatory with the Russians, because of course, why would you need such a system if you wanted to make peace with the Russians, like Trump is saying? The proposed custody layer would focus on sensing and tracking missiles, not on weaponization. So it would be about data. Nonetheless, it is going to be an essential part of it. SpaceX has estimated the preliminary engineering and design work for this layer to cost between $6 and $10 billion Everything about Elon Musk is about the panopticon. Eventually, all of these technologies, Cybercab, Neuralink, Tesla Vision, Optimus robots, X, he's going to step down, and all those oppressive technologies are going to remain under a different form of management that I assure you, you will not approve of. And you heard that here first, okay? What else do we got to talk about today? Oh yes, there was a Northrop Grumman factory which exploded recently, a massive explosion. Some people are chalking this up to sabotage. I would chalk it up to incompetence. It's very likely that the accelerated pace of weapons manufacturing, that they're doing so haphazardly, and we're going to see a lot more of these accidents. The more military activity that is going on, the more accidents you're going to see. And it's as simple as that, okay? Denmark is reactivating their coastal missile defense. They're reportedly considering reactivating coastal defense with Norwegian Kongsberg missile batteries. The move follows past experience, lessons from the Ukraine conflict, and commonality with their naval missiles. Now, could this be related to the fact that in the Baltics, they are now threatening to commandeer Russian vessels out of fear that they are sabotaging undersea cables? Could have something to do with that. So either way, Europe is starting to get in a higher state of readiness posture. And Russia has recently ended the moratorium on energy infrastructural strikes. So that means that they're going to start bombing Ukrainian power plants once again. According to James Stavridis, a former U.S. admiral, I believe he was an admiral, possibly a general, 3-star general, I believe. He claims that there are 5 primary reasons why we will go to war with China, and likely by 2027. Reasons being increased amount of cyber attacks, China building ships at a prodigious rate currently, which vastly exceeds the rate in which the U.S. is building ships, the current trade war, of course, aviational pressure on Taiwan, and expansion of Chinese forces into the South China Sea. And I could probably think of another 20 reasons why that war is inevitable. What it's going to look like, of course, we're ill prepared to fight any conflict with the Chinese. But I really just think that what we're going to see with China is a Cold War, which is going to prompt the mobilization of U.S. military forces. And you will see a U.S. standing army of 5 to 10 million within your lifetime. Mark my words. In terms of finance and tech, here's what's going on. The Federal Reserve has lost $200 billion in the last 2 years, okay? This is unprecedented. Once again, every week, something unprecedented. Investors are dumping stocks. Foreigners are dumping stocks. More precisely, retail is FOMOing in to this bear trap right now. But foreign investment is divesting from the U.S. stock market at a rapid pace. According to Pocahontas, Elizabeth Warren, markets will crash if Jerome Powell is fired. Understand why Trump wants Powell back. He wants him to turn on the money printers once again and lower interest rates and initiate QE, 5 now? That's essentially what they want. And all the crypto bros are cheering for this, which is an obscene contradiction. Because decentralized finance was created for the purpose of circumventing this oppressive monetary system that stems from these centralized forms of monetary control. And all I'm seeing right now is the crypto bros waiting for them to turn on the money printers so they can hyperinflate all of these risk-on assets once again. It's absolutely absurd to see this mania right now. We're a nation of drug addicts, and there's a big detox coming, okay? And people need to get ready. And as we've been saying since gold was back in the 1300s, 6 years ago, you know, if you want to get into a safe haven that isn't food, that isn't bullets, that isn't Band-Aids, and all your preps, then there's no better thing than precious metals, okay? But that's not financial advice at this point in time. In fact, Gold being at 3,300, it doesn't really matter, but we are definitely due for a little bit of a pullback. But my sneaking suspicion is that we're going to go up to 4,500, and it's likely going to retrace after that. That's probably going to be the watermark of this run, is somewhere around the 4,500 region, for reasons that I'm not going to get into today. That's not financial advice. Fed Chair Powell says that we may find ourselves facing a very difficult scenario in the near term. And remember that insurance agency that was having that conversation about what they're going to do in a panic if the banks collapse? I believe it's the FDIC. Remember that was talked about a few years ago? I think that's going to become very, very relevant in 2025 when the dominoes start to fall. So if you got a lot of money in the bank, I'm just saying you might want to consider some alternatives, because there may come a point when those banks collapse, and that money that you had in there, which legally, I can't remember the legalese aspect of it, but the bank essentially owns the money, even though you put it in there. You might want to look into that. That's all I'm saying. There was a Minecraft AI server simulation. Okay, get a load of this. Researchers placed 1,000 AI agents. These like chatbots. Well, an agent is a slightly more sophisticated, a lot more sophisticated than a chatbot, okay? And they put them into a Minecraft server, and these AI agents just put into a server and said, go build something. They developed their own civilization with government, culture, and economy. And the schemes in which some of the AI agents used in order to get ahead within the simulation, it's very uncanny in terms of human capabilities, okay? So we're getting very close, and this is very reminiscent. If you want to look up something interesting, check out Conway's Game of Life. It was a simulation utilizing a few sets of core principles back in, I believe it was the 90s, early 90s, maybe late 80s. And so Conway inputted a bunch of primary conditions and just basically turned the thing on, and things started at a very simple level and it became increasingly more complex just on the basis of a handful of rules. So we could see some emergent intelligence out of that. Either way, according to former Google CEO Eric Schmidt, AI is about to take over. If you haven't figured it out yet, yeah, there's that too. The computers are now doing self-improvement. They don't have to listen to us anymore, he says. So he's already reached the singularity, that point in recursive learning where computers are teaching themselves. And I can tell you guys, everybody by the end of the year is going to be talking to their phones, okay? It's like in the movie Her with Joaquin Phoenix, it's going to be like that by the end of the year. Mark my words. Probably you too, because it's just going to be easier. Within 6 years, a mind smarter than the sum of humans, scaled, recursive, free. We have no language for what's coming. In fact, the AIs already have their own language. Guys, I got to go. There's a lot of work to do on the homestead. And like I said, I got a real bad feeling about the next couple weeks in the pit of my stomach. So buckle up.